The last radio call. Listen, I've been a park ranger for 12 years, search and rescue specifically. We have protocols for everything, lost hikers, animal attacks, severe weather. But what happened 3 months ago, there's no protocol for that. And it's why I submitted my resignation yesterday. It was a standard missing person case. Sarah Chen, experienced hiker, didn't return from a day trip to Black Pine Ridge. Her car was at the trailhead, emergency beacon never activated. Simple enough, right? I'd done this 100 times. The first red flag. Her phone was still in her car, charged. No hiker that experienced forgets their phone. But what really got me was the last photo on it, taken just an hour before she disappeared. A selfie. But in the background, well, I'll get to that. We started the search at dawn. Clear skies, perfect visibility. I took the north section with my search dog, Rex. He's never failed to find someone. German Shepherd, best nose in the department. But that day, he was different. Anxious, whining at shadows. 2 hours in, we found our first marker, a blue trail ribbon tied to a branch. Standard hiker procedure, marking your path. Except, the knot was wrong. Sarah was a climbing instructor. She'd never tie a knot that sloppy. And the ribbon, it was warm, like fresh out of the dryer warm, in the freezing morning air. Then the radio call started. Quick bursts of static, then voices, but not from our search team. They were fragments. A child laughing, an old man coughing, a woman humming, all breaking through our secure frequency, all crystal clear, like they were standing right next to me. Rex froze, hackles up, staring into the trees. I followed his gaze and... Have you ever seen those deep, fake videos? Where something looks almost right, but wrong. The trees look like that. Like someone had copied and pasted them. Some backwards, some sideways. Then I saw it. Another ribbon. Black this time. We don't use black ribbons. Ever. It was tied at chest height, pointing deeper into the woods, and behind it, more ribbons, dozens, all black. All wrong. The radio crackled again. This time I heard Sarah's voice, not calling for help, not scared. She was giving coordinates, over and over, but they were coordinates for a location 2,000 miles away, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. That's when Rex bolted, just turned and ran, never saw him again. Search dogs don't do that. They don't abandon their handlers. Ever. But what happened next? I still can't explain. My radio picked up one last transmission. My own voice. Not from that day, but from my first ever search and rescue call 6 years ago. Word for word, but played backwards. Then I found her backpack. Sitting in a perfect circle of those black ribbons. Inside was her journal. The last entry. It was in her handwriting, but it wasn't words. Just the same symbol over and over. The same symbol I now realize was in the background of her last selfie. A symbol that, when I tried to draw it later, my pen wouldn't mark the paper. We never found Sarah. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. 2 days ago, her phone uploaded a new photo to her cloud account. A selfie. Taken an hour ago. She hasn't aged a day. She's smiling. And behind her, well, it looks like a forest. But not any forest on Earth. I'm not saying I know what happened to Sarah Chen. I'm not saying I know why Rex ran, or why those ribbons were warm, or why my radio played impossible things. But I do know this. I've spent 12 years in these woods, and that day I learned something. Sometimes, when you go looking for missing people, you realize they might not be the ones who are lost. The night shift. Before I tell this story, I need you to understand something. I've been a park ranger for 15 years. I'm not someone who scares easily. I've handled bear encounters, rescued lost hikers, and dealt with every kind of emergency you can imagine. But what happened that night, It changed everything. It started like any other night shift. Thunder Ridge Trail, Eastern Perimeter, standard patrol. The kind I'd done hundreds of times before. The air was crisp, pine needles crunching under my boots. Just me, my flashlight, and the usual cricket symphony. 1930 hours. I was doing my routine radio check when I heard it, through the static. Help, Sector 7. My blood ran cold. See, Sector 7 had been decommissioned 3 years ago after the mudslides. Nobody should have been broadcasting from there. I radioed dispatch. Did you copy that transmission? Nothing. They heard nothing, but I knew what I heard. And that's when I noticed something else. The crickets had stopped. If you work in the woods long enough, you learn that when nature goes quiet, something's wrong. That's when I saw the light. About half a mile out, through the trees. Not the typical beam of a hiker's flashlight. Not the warm glow of a campfire. This was different. It moved like it had purpose. Protocol said to investigate. Experience told me to call for backup. But Davis, the nearest ranger, was clear on the other side of the park. So I did what any ranger would do. I went to check it out. The path to Sector 7 was completely overgrown. Nature had reclaimed it. Each step sank into soft earth. Branches grabbed at my uniform. But that light stayed just ahead. Always visible, never getting closer. Like it was leading me somewhere. Then I saw them. Eyes. Not animal eyes. I know every predator in these woods. These were wrong. Too high off the ground, spaced too wide apart, and they were watching me. My radio crackled again. But this time I heard my own voice coming through the speaker. My exact words from earlier, marking my position. But I hadn't keyed my radio. The eyes blinked. Not together, each one at different times, like they weren't connected. I'd like to tell you I stood my ground, that I followed procedure. But 15 years of experience meant nothing in that moment. I ran. Faster than I've ever run in my life. Branches whipped my face. Roots tried to trip me. I didn't stop until I reached my truck, heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. The official report says I encountered illegal campers who fled the scene. That's what we're trained to write. That's what makes sense. But here's what the report doesn't say. I still patrolled Thunder Ridge, but never alone. Never at night. And I never, ever answer calls from Sector 7. Some say the mind plays tricks in the dark. That fear makes us see things that aren't there. Maybe they're right. But if it was all in my head, why did they permanently close Sector 7 the very next day? And why do I still hear my own voice on that radio on quiet nights when I'm alone? Park Ranger's Cave. Discovery. I need to get this story off my chest. After 20 years as a park ranger, I thought I'd seen everything. Bears, mountain lions, lost hikers, but nothing prepared me for what I discovered in that cave last summer. And now, every time I hear the wind whistle through the pines, I wonder if it's really just the wind. The day started with a routine call. Hikers reported strange noises coming from an unmarked cave system in the North Ridge. Normally, we'd chalk it up to wildlife, maybe some coyotes. But something in their voices, the way they described it, it wasn't quite right. Like singing, they said, but not human, and not animal either. That should have been my first warning. I grabbed my gear and headed out. The cave wasn't on any of our maps, which wasn't unusual for our park. We discover new openings every year after the spring thaw. But this one was different. The entrance was almost perfectly circular, like it had been carved. And the rocks around it, they had these markings. Not graffiti, not natural erosion. They looked like writing, but no language I'd ever seen. The air coming from the cave was warm. That's not normal. Cave air is typically cool, especially in our region. But this, it felt like breathing next to a furnace. And there was this smell, like copper and ozone, like the air before a lightning strike. Standard procedure says never enter an unknown cave system alone. But I had my radio, my backup was 20 minutes out, and those sounds, they were getting louder. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The tunnel sloped down at an impossible angle. According to my equipment, I should have hit the water table after about 50 feet, but I kept going down and down. The walls, they were smooth. Too smooth. And they had that same writing, spiraling down like a thread on a screw. That's when I heard it. The singing. Except, calling it singing doesn't do it justice. It was like, imagine a whale song, mixed with wind chimes, mixed with something else. Something that made my teeth vibrate and my head spin. My flashlight started flickering. Not the normal dying battery flicker. It was pulsing in rhythm with the sound. And in those moments of darkness, I saw them. Lines of bioluminescent. Something flowing through the walls. Following patterns. Creating shapes that hurt to look at. I reached for my radio to call for backup. Static. But through that static, I heard voices. Hundreds of them. All talking at once. In languages I knew and languages I didn't. Some didn't even sound human. Then my flashlight died completely, but I could still see. The walls were glowing now, pulsing with colors that don't exist. And at the end of the tunnel, there was a chamber, and in that chamber, my next clear memory is of Hansen, my backup, shaking me awake at the cave entrance. I was covered in some kind of phosphorescent dust that disappeared before we could sample it. My camera was fried. The data on my phone was corrupted. And the cave... We searched for hours, the entire North Ridge. But the cave was gone. Just solid rock where the entrance had been. The official report says I suffered from toxic gas exposure. Hallucinations. That's what we're supposed to write. But they can't explain the markings on my boots. Markings that match the writing I saw. They can't explain why my compass now spins in perfect circles. And they definitely can't explain why. On quiet nights, I still hear that singing, coming from somewhere deep beneath the earth. The strangest part? 3 days ago I got a classified memo. Every major cave system in North America is being remapped. No reason given. But I know why. They're looking for something. And I think what I found was just the beginning.